have supplies that have just sat there unused or barely used? I know I do. So today I've challenged myself to use one supply that's rather pigeonholed into what it is and use it 3 different ways to get totally different results. Let's get crafting. So the product I'm going to be using today is this Spellbinders embossing folder, and it's called Holiday Floral Swag, and it's gorgeous. It's brand new to me. I absolutely adore it for Christmas. But how else can I use this Christmas folder in a non-Christmas way? So today I'm going to show you 3 different examples of great ways to change what you have into something that you can use year-round, even when you think it's a pigeonholed item. Let's change the color scheme. Now this might seem like an obvious first choice, but let's go with very non-traditional colors. I'm going to use this large blending brush because we're going to be coloring the entire piece of cardstock, and I'm using Distress Oxides, and the first color is Kitsch Flamingo. Now this is a beautiful pink, and I'm going over the cardstock rather lightly. I am using what I typically use for my base cardstock. I've cut down a piece of 100-pound accent opaque cardstock. This is a much heavier weight card than what I typically use, but I did that because this embossing folder has a lot of detail and depth. So I wanted to make sure I could capture that in the card. Now I'm just using a scrap piece of card to hold down that cardstock to keep my fingers from getting in the wet ink, because ultimately this entire piece of cardstock is going to be colored. Now, it doesn't have to be a perfect blend by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, I quite like the light and dark areas of this cardstock. Now, this is a really large embossing folder, so we're only going to be capturing just a small amount of it because my preferred card size is A2, which is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. Now I'm bringing in Uncharted Mariner. Now, this is a delicious teal color, and I'm only going to be using this very lightly around the edges of 2 sides of the cardstock. And wait till you see how this Uncharted Mariner blends with the Kitsch Flamingo. It's stunning. Now I want to make sure that I don't get any real harsh lines, with the exception of the very edge of the cardstock. I am tapping it off onto my silicone mat there, and then blending off the cardstock first and then bringing it into the center of the card. Now I've only chosen to do 2 sides of this because I'm highlighting where I'm going to be placing this inside my embossing folder. And that Uncharted Mariner totally transformed because it turned into a very beautiful purple. And I know red and blue make purple, but wow, I didn't expect that. Now I'm just using the residual ink off of the larger blending brush to kind of soften the inside edges of that as we move into the next step. Now I want to make sure all of this ink is pretty well dry, so I'm giving it a quick zap with my embossing heat tool. It is set on 1. 1 is for heating, drying, and step 2 on this particular embossing tool is for melting. So we're not melting anything yet, so we're just going to go ahead and use it on option 1. Now here is this stunning folder, and it's called Holiday Floral Swag. Now I'm only going to be using the left bottom side of this embossing folder because it's the part with the bow, and I think it is absolutely stunning. So the first technique I'm going to do is bringing in my white pigment ink. Now this one is Unicorn White Pigment Ink by Hero Arts, and pretty much today I discovered that it's probably the only ink that I don't have a re-inker for and desperately need. So that is now on my list of things to get soon. Now there's definitely a couple of different ways that you can achieve this look. I'm using a detailed blending brush, and I am literally brushing that white pigment ink into the embossed or depressed area, the part that has the little well. That's the part that I've put the white pigment ink into. It's not the raised part of the embossing folder. I am coloring the indented side only. And I know I'm really being messy, and that's okay because I'm just going to use a damp paper towel and wipe over the embossing folder before I put it through my Spellbinders Platinum 6 die cutting machine. Before I run any cardstock through a 3D embossing folder, especially a 3D embossing folder, I always give the back of the cardstock a quick spritz of water to help loosen up the fibers so I get a great impression. My intention with this one was to create a subtle white pigment ink effect. If I wanted to do something more definitively white, I would have done direct to paper. And I'm going to finish this up with some very subtle embossing powder. So I'm going to use some VERSAMARK, any clear sticky ink will work, and some embossing powder. Now I've decided to switch up my paintbrush, and I've gone with a very fine tipped paintbrush, and it's pretty firm. I just wanted to be able to paint on some lines of the VERSAMARK to follow the lines of the leaves and of the bow. And I'm going to speed this up so we can get through and you can see a final product. So I must confess that I totally had a major fail here. I forgot the embossing bag. That's a cardinal sin when it comes to embossing. But I'm using Snowflake Tinsel by Ranger, and it's a brand new bottle and was superbly full. So I kind of dumped it everywhere. And I also realized that it's not terribly white, which was the look that I was going for, but that's okay because I really wanted the silver glitter out of this one, and I really wasn't getting what I wanted out of that particular embossing powder. But I'm just going to go ahead and brush off wherever it kind of stuck to my still damp ink, and then I'm going to go ahead and heat emboss it. To eliminate a lot of the warping of your cardstock, preheat your heat tool for about 20 seconds. And if you have glitter, or in this case tinsel embossing powder, heat from the bottom to melt it so you don't lose the glitter. Now while it's pretty, it's extremely subtle and really not the look that I was going for. So we're going back to the drawing board. No point in throwing anything away. You can make it work. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add some more VERSAMARK, and then I'm going to switch over to some superfine silver embossing powder. And that one's going to do the trick. Now, did you forget that this was a Christmas embossing folder? I know I did, because by changing the colors, I changed the way that I feel about this specific embossing folder. And Lord knows I'm going to get a lot of use out of this. In fact, off camera, I did quite a few with this exact same technique, just using completely different and non-traditional colors. Be sure to hang with me to the end because I'm going to show you a whole bunch of finished cards. The next way to change your craft supplies is simply change the sentiments. Do you know someone who's born around the holidays? They don't want a Christmas birthday card. They want a birthday card. So change up the sentiment. All I did was put a beautiful Uncharted Mariner happy birthday stamp on this card, and it's done. And the third way is to change your techniques. Want to get more from your embossing folders? Haven't seen my videos on how to get 20 different techniques to get 20 different looks from your embossing folders? I will leave them linked at the end of the video for you. In the meantime, I also have a fantastic digital product that you can find on my digital storefront, which I will leave in the description box below, along with all the supplies that I used today. This is called 20 Sensational Embossing Folder Techniques, and they're flashcards that are half sheet size. And you can print them on cardstock, or you can print them on copy paper and laminate them. You can leave them whole and put them in a binder with a sheet protector, or you can cut them apart and laminate them, and you can store them on a ring clip, much like my Tim Holtz stencils are stored. Whatever works for you, but these are great because they give you the name of the technique, how to achieve it, and a color illustration of what to expect when you use that technique. And well, I need a lot of reminders, so these come in handy for me, and I know they will for you too. To change up my technique, I'm going to use stamping foam, and this is a really inexpensive way to get loads more out of your product. I am just heating this up for about 10 seconds with my heat tool, and once it's nice and warm, I'm going to go ahead and use it as a stamp onto my embossing folder, and I'm going to use a different part of the embossing folder than what I have been using. So I'm going to place it on there, and then I've got a large block that I'm going to go ahead and put on top and just give it a very firm press until I make sure that that foam has cooled off and the impression is embedded in it. It won't come out until you reheat the foam. Now remember, this is just greenery, so I'm going to use Distress Oxide in Rustic Wilderness, and I'm rubbing my stamp pad over the entire face of the stamping foam. Once you get a good coverage that you're happy with, you're going to give the stamping foam a quick mist of water and then use it like a stamp right onto your cardstock, and you're going to get a completely different look from that folder than what we did earlier. Now I find that you can use your hands to press this, but you might get an uneven pressure giving you uneven results. Not that there's anything wrong with that, because it can be really cool, but by using my ink block or my stamping block, look at the result we got. It's stunning. Another example of changing up your embossing folder is to use distressed spray embossing. Now I'm using a Distress Oxide ink pad over the flat portion of my embossing folder, and I'm not going to cover the whole thing because I'm not going to use it, so there's no point in wasting the ink. I just want to get pretty good coverage. Now I'm using the Uncharted Mariner again because, well, it's stunning, but I'm just going to go ahead and rub that over the flat part. And then we're going to run our piece of cardstock through the embossing machine. Now after embossing, you'll notice that the ink has now transferred to the cardstock, and I apologize because I was out of frame here. I have cleaned off the remaining ink from my embossing folder, and I'm going to put it into a small splat box, and I'm going to be using saltwater taffy Distress Oxide spray, and I'm giving it a pretty good spray, and then I'm going to go ahead and wipe off any extra from the flat portion with a towel. And then I realized my towel sopped up some of the ink and I needed to do it again, but no worries. It all comes together in the end. Everything can be fixed. Now you'll see I don't have much of the saltwater taffy on the cardstock, so we're going to do it again. And the card will fit back into the embossing folder nicely. You just have to find where it clicks into place, and you'll be able to re-emboss without a problem. So this time I wised up, and I'm just going to use a paper towel, and I'm blotting up the extra. Go ahead and run it through, and now we're going to get the desired effect. Once again, you've got to admit, this doesn't scream Christmas. The colors alone change the way that you feel about the embossing folder. Stepping away from traditional colors and sentiments changes how we can use this embossing folder. Look at the results. And I couldn't resist one Christmas card out of this gorgeous folder. Now, changing techniques, I've used stamping foam and that embossing folder to create a beautiful happy birthday card. And this is distressed spray embossing to create a great hello card. Check out these other videos that I've selected just for you. Until next time, I'll see you real soon.